Critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today, we're pleased and honored to have a returning guest, Miss Carla Howell. She is the Libertarian Party Political Director. She's been a guest on this show before, but she's also been on Neil Cavuto Show, The O'Reilly Factor, Glenn Beck, Fox Business News, Happy Hour, and hundreds of other TV and radio interviews and debates since 1998. During our live broadcast, we invite you to call 646-652-4620. That's 646-652-4620 during our live broadcast only, obviously. And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, just press the one button. Carla, welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back.
Well, Carla, we talked before, and I think we're going to discuss Trump's proposals from a libertarian perspective.
Well, let's see. Where do we begin? On his health care bill. Can we get into the health care bill?
Okay, that'll be fine.
All right. Well, this one, on the one hand, the Liberty Caucus of the GOP protested against it. A lot of good people like Thomas Massie and Justin Amash opposed it. Rand Paul opposed it. And their position was that it wouldn't have substantially brought down insurance premiums. It was kowtowing too much to the insurance companies. And I totally appreciate that, and I appreciate their standing up to the powers that be within their party and demanding something better. We certainly need something better. They certainly should have proposed something dramatically better. They're not really getting to a lot of the root of the problem, which is money, and that is not your and my money, but the money of special interests, in this case, insurance companies, as well as pretty much the entire health care industry. Providers were against the bill. So they wanted to see, they were against the bill, but the insurance companies made sure they were covered, basically. They made sure that they were going to keep getting revenues and bailouts and protections from the government. And that's a big problem. On the other hand, the proposal did do some critical things, and most importantly, it would have ended the mandate on individuals and on small businesses. Big companies already have a mandate from other pre-existing federal legislation, but it would have it would have been nice to see an end to those mandates. It also ended subsidies, but then it gave all kinds of handouts and tax credits and other things to mitigate that. So I personally have somewhat mixed feelings about it and what I would have done as a congressman, based on what I know, which isn't enough, because the final bill, as far as I know, we don't know exactly what was in that bill, and it's several hundred pages long, of course, and so I'm not sure. I generally like to say, vote yes on anything that moves us in the right direction. Does this move us in the right direction? I honestly don't know. I don't know if it would have just preempted real change or if it would have paved the way to real change. I have not yet been able to determine that. But here's what I do know. We need much more bold proposals being put out there. And we need to get to the real core issues, which is questioning what is government doing in the healthcare business. It is not authorized to do so under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It has no authority to be involved and healthcare, and yet it's involved in Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, ERISA, CHIP, SHIP, the HMO Act, just IRS regulations, just rules and regulations and subsidies and mandates that don't quit. And they need to all go away. The FDA, that's something I'd like to see put on the table, because that is a no-brainer. That is something that, yes, would be a hard sell with certain people, but when you lay it out there, what does the FDA do for us? Well, what it does is it drives up the cost of drugs dramatically. It suppresses the research and development of drugs for rare diseases, because the FDA imposes such onerous regulations on pharmaceuticals. They kind of have no choice but to get in bed with the FDA. And this is what always happens. When government regulates, there starts to be a revolving door between that industry and government. And that's what you have with pharmaceuticals. They are now required to spend between $1 and $2 billion to develop one drug. Now, if it's a rare disease and only 5,000 people have the disease, that means that what they have to charge to recoup those expenses is exorbitant. And so you have a lot of drugs today that are absolutely exorbitantly priced. And they also very arrogantly say, if you have a terminal disease, you have to wait until we approve a drug, which is just on its face absurd. It's just crazy that they would get away with this.
That's exactly right. A person has 2 weeks to live, but if they take this pill, and let's assume that the government was absolutely right. It's a killer pill. It's not going to solve anything. And the person maybe dies 24 hours ahead of time. I mean, which is absurd. They probably would never do that. It would take months for that to take place. But at least they stand a chance. And nothing the government does is logical, because I'm losing my mind with our government. I do not watch mainstream television anymore. Even those that I had some modicum of respect for, I have just tossed aside, because my wife says, you watch them for 5 minutes and you're so angry you're in bed for 24 hours. It really is. And I love that, we have to pass the bill so that we can determine what's in it, things like that. I mean, why didn't we have an uprising and just dump everybody out of Congress once these clowns, clowns said that, agreed with that? Why didn't the populace, which are a bunch of zombies, unfortunately, say, all right, now we know that you guys are clinically insane, out the door, you're all gone,
And yet, that's why a lot of people voted for Trump, in the hope that he would do that, or at least come closer to doing that than the other alternatives that they saw were a choice amongst the Democrats and Republicans. They had a choice of Gary Johnson. That would have been a much better choice. There's a guy who said he wanted to balance the budget without raising tax revenues, which meant taking hundreds of billions of dollars out of the federal budget and shrinking it. Trump has proposed some spending cuts and then a massive increase in military spending and Homeland Security. So we keep it at $4 trillion. That's not draining the swamp. That's keeping it right up where it is at this astronomically high level.
Absolutely.
So we need people who will get in there, and libertarians are where you find these people, the Libertarian Party candidates. They're willing to say, cut the government dramatically, end taxes and replace it with nothing. Get rid of these regulatory bureaucracies right now. No screwing around. I loved the meme that someone put up at the Libertarian Party website that had a billboard that said "repeal and replace Obamacare," and they had an image of a guy with a paintbrush crossing out the "and replace." Yeah, right. So we need bold proposals. The FDA is one example of something that the difficulty with trying to go in steps with all this insurance stuff is that because you have such a morass of federal and state subsidies, regulations, mandates that are interdependent, it's hard to break that juggernaut and not be accused of throwing people off the insurance rolls and giving them no alternatives and not being able to pass it as a result. But something like ending the FDA, there's everything to gain by doing that. No one wins by having an FDA except the FDA, some people in academics, the pharmaceuticals, the people who profit from it. you and I and everybody else who simply just wants good health care, the way we get that with respect to drugs is to have a free market in the research, development, and sale of drugs, and allow the free market to regulate it. Now, free market regulation, as you know, is far more powerful and effective than government regulation because it's monitored continually by people with a real vested interest in fact, having quality. The FDA, the FDA not only demands all these years and years of testing to prove that a drug is so-called safe, which, by the way, just because they approve it doesn't make it safe. And when they don't approve it doesn't make it dangerous. But they also have the gall to say that the drug company has to prove that it's efficacious, i.e. that it works for the stated purpose.
Carla, may I interrupt you for a second, please? I seem to have lost your stereo. I think only half your voice is coming out. When you touched your microphone, your microphone, I seem to have lost about half your voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but I'm missing you halfway. So could it be on our board or is it on her end? No, we didn't touch anything? I don't see how it could be. Why don't you move it a little bit? You moved it back and forth and it didn't work? Okay. When you moved it, all of a sudden I lost you in my left ear I lost the stereo, if you will.
Well, I'm jiggling my headset. I don't know why that's true.
Okay, I don't know why. Okay, I just wanted to mention that to you because I'm not sure how it's going to record. All right, you're okay now? As far as I can tell. You're okay? Okay. All right, I'm sorry, Carl.
Okay.
It seems to be okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, all right. So what we need to do is replace the FDA with market regulation, and this will work like Amazon works, or eBay, or any website where consumers are constantly providing feedback on whether something works or doesn't work. We don't need the FDA saying that we have to prove that it works, nor that they have to prove that it's safe. The market will do that much better, much more effectively. There's been a lot of research on this topic. It's the powers that be are in absolute denial. I mean, look at Uber. We have better cab service when we got rid of these regulations or circumvented them that are imposed on taxis. Market regulations work. Market regulations create quality, create better service. That's what should be driving healthcare. What we ultimately need to be shooting for, and we need to be saying this repeatedly, the goal needs to be to get the government completely and utterly out of healthcare. Not just the federal government, but the state governments. And they're big troublemakers too. They impose thousands of regulations on insurance companies, subsidies, mandates, requirements, bailouts, just like Obamacare bails out, and this GOP bill would have bailed out insurance companies. There's no need for any of that. And one of the things that I find interesting, I happen to be come upon a factoid, a description of healthcare in Panama, country of Panama, and they said most people don't have insurance, but it's not a problem for most people because it's so cheap they can just afford it. We have been lulled into believing that healthcare has to be this crazy, astronomically high-priced expense. It does not need to be that at all. Or as one veterinary tech said to me, he said the procedures that they do on human surgery, like a shoulder surgery or something, for $25,000 on a human, he says we do the same thing on animals for $2,500. And now you can say, oh, humans and animals aren't the same. No, they're not exactly the same. But, it gives you some idea of how inflated the costs are. They're crazy inflated. So when a healthcare catastrophe that costs $500,000 should actually cost $50,000.
Right.
And that's pretty much the high end of what anyone would pay. There are still those cases that can go to $1 million, but most things don't go up beyond that high. When something that costs $500,000 can be purchased for $50,000, there's a whole lot of people who would say, I don't need insurance because it's unlikely to happen, and if it does, I could mortgage my house, I could ask certain relatives for help, I'd have ways to cover it. Or I could go on a payment plan or something. And really just a small number of people would even need catastrophic insurance. Now, many may opt for catastrophic, but it would be cheap. It would be dirt cheap. And the out-of-cost expenses for doctor visits, labs, drugs, procedures would be so affordable. We'd be negotiating on a cash basis. Now, you get all these nasty state regulations out of the way, licensing regulations, insurance regulations, mandates, bailouts, etc. It becomes dirt cheap. You also have to remove these restrictions on self-care and charitable care. So, for instance, Doctors Without Borders did some free dental work no, it wasn't Doctors Without Borders, it was another organization like that goes into third world countries. Well, they tried doing this in the United States. And the only state where they could do it in was Tennessee, legally, where they put up tents and served something like 1,500 people in a day for free who needed dental care. And they had to turn away a lot of people. There were so many people waiting in line overnight to get in for this. Now, what's wrong with this picture? You have people who are willing to help, and a government telling them that they can't. And then that same government, those politicians saying, well, everybody runs to the emergency room. Well, maybe they wouldn't if you wouldn't outlaw free clinics so they can get free care from people willing to give it, no cost to the taxpayer. It's a perfect solution. So these are two things we can do immediately that wouldn't try to unravel which we still need to do, the huge juggernaut of government and state and federal laws and regulations. But immediately relax licensing laws, allow self-care, and above all, allow charitable care to be unregulated, and get rid of the FDA, replace it with market regulation, which will make drugs safer, and dramatically open up the world of medical research. So people with an idea, I had a woman that I knew in Massachusetts who worked at a biotech company, and she said they were working on FDA approval of a drug. And they serendipitously, which is how a lot of things happen, not because of government on high giving people money, but a lot of scientific discovery happens serendipitously. And they discovered that the drug she was working on had an application for a rare, fatal childhood disease. And she explained that she and the other researchers got very excited about the possibility that they would be able to bring this to market and save kids. And their management immediately shut it down and said, it's too rare a disease. We'd go out of business immediately. Would have no way of funding the research for this and getting through the FDA approvals. Boom, there goes the fate of, a few thousand kids with a fatal disease. That's insane. That is cruel and unusual punishment. It's despicable. It's inexcusable. And we have to have the conversation about things like this. Get rid of the FDA. Bringing down drug prices isn't going to solve every problem with healthcare, but it is a big problem because there's a lot of drugs that are crazy expensive for people to afford. And even if their insurance company pays for it, that's jacking up everybody's insurance premiums, and we certainly need to get those down. So,
what you're saying is ABC logic. I mean, there's nothing complicated about it. Everyone in Washington knows that. These people must be criminals not to propose that. I mean, because they know, in effect, by not proposing that many people's lives are being wasted because of regulation. They know that. They're not that stupid. But they would take their jobs and their alliances with whomever's paying them to make these decisions over and above the livelihood of the population, which is contrary to what their job is. I mean, the exact opposite. I mean, you'd be better off with a dictatorship. At least you know where it's coming from and you know who to blame. But everyone plays the good guy, but behind the scenes, they're all the bad guys. And I don't know what they know, and I don't think it ultimately matters. I think they rationalize it in their mind, and it's reinforced by the media and their colleagues and their special interests all around them. So they get a lot of reinforcement that they're right, and people are capable of convincing themselves of a lot of things. So I don't know what they actually
No, I mean, certainly at some level they know the whole thing is just corrupt as hell, which it is.
Well, yeah,
At
why
some
don't
level
you
they
hear
all
some
know
of these
that,
clowns on television at least saying that? And we have someone on the line? We have someone up? Yeah, what the area code? 973. Area code, be ready to hang up in case. Area code 973, you're on the air. Caller, area code 973, you're on the air. I cannot hear you. Are they there? They're still there? Caller, area 973, you're on the air. Your question or comment, please. Okay. No one's there. All right, they disappeared. All right, I want to present to you, Carl, and you can tell me how nutty I am, but I really wish you and I would have been invited by Trump to talk about health care. I think we would have squared him away very quickly. Let me give you what I would have told him about health care. I'd say, okay, I recognize it's politically unpopular for you to get up and say, okay, no more government health care. Health care is a responsibility of the family. If I have children, I am responsible for the health care of my children. The healthier that I raise my children, the less likely they will need medical care. So it's even my not only do I love my children, I don't want to see them ill, but it's in my financial interest to make sure that they are well, et cetera, et cetera. Here would be my proposal, and I want your feedback on this, to Donald Trump. Remember Romney Care? Why don't you just say, oh no, the government will provide everything as we had before. However, it'll be administered by the state, and each state will have the right to change and modify whatever they want in health care according to their constitution. But the federal government is getting out of the health care business 100%. It is now the responsibility of each state, okay? And we will save, as a result, hundreds of billions of dollars just by making that one change alone. What's your comment on that?
I didn't quite follow your part about Romney Care.
Romney Care was a state-initiated medical.
You're saying they would have the option to have a Romney Care?
Yeah, I mean, just saying that. Just delegate medical, which is not right. Delegate down to the state. Now, you may have one state saying, hey, you want medical care? We have a free market system. Go, girl, go, right? The state next to them may say, we're going to have the same restrictions as the federal, But people who live in state A state B may move to state A.
Right.
Eventually. In other words, the free market will start working because you have competition among states, at least. Not the best solution, but at least it's a step in the right direction, bringing it closer to the people. Many states would say, don't want it, can't afford it, don't want to do it. You say, fine, then don't do it. Have a free market system. But we're out of it. It's your decision, your sovereignty.
Certainly what you're saying is true in that states would do it differently, and Texas would probably be a lot different from Massachusetts, where Romney Care was enacted and still is the law of the land. But then again, Indiana, which is a relatively conservative, libertarian-leaning state, their governor back 5-10 years ago was proposing something like Romney Care. No state is immune from the potential for onerous socialized medicine laws being passed. Vermont, Maine, Hawaii have already passed laws like this in various stages. Luckily, the one in Vermont found out it couldn't fund itself, and it's sort of on hold, which is kind of funny, being Bernie Sanders' home state. But one thing I would say about your suggestion is, first of all, the idea of pushing things to the states, we don't want to encourage the states to do anything in healthcare. We want to encourage the states to get out of healthcare also, because they're a big part of the problem here. And a lot of Republicans will say their mantra is push it, leave it to the states and let them compete. Well, I think we need to use our bully pulpit to always point out that the laws of economics do not change just because you move from federal to state government. A bad idea at the federal level is a bad idea at the state level.
No, I understand that. But see, my state senator lives 3 blocks from my house. He'll see me every day.
We live in Nebraska, right?
What's that?
You're in Nebraska, right?
No, in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. I'm sorry, you're in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I stand a chance of speaking to this guy. I mean, I can speak to him. I mean, they have these little forums where you can speak to him directly. I have no chance of speaking to my...
I could call it my state rep when I lived in Massachusetts. It didn't do a whole heck of a lot of good. But here's the thing.
But if 400 people were in front of his house, with torches, I tell you, they'll listen real quickly.
I mean, you always want to put pressure on them whenever you can.
Yeah.
But I would say I'm not too enamored of that whole approach, because I think we need to very strongly assert that in no way do we endorse or condone states taking up the slack here. Now, if you got the federal government out of health care, first thing that would happen, and really, which isn't going to happen, but anytime soon. But if you did, that would mean first ending Medicare. So all your seniors would suddenly, in that state, would not have that portion of health care. You'd be getting rid of federal subsidies for Medicaid, which the states, this is the biggest line item on most state government budgets. They get billions of dollars in each state just for Medicaid. It's a huge part of their budget. So they would say, oh my God, you're taking away. I mean, last I looked in Massachusetts, it was well over $10 billion that they get every year from the federal government for Medicaid or Obamacare, whatever they want to call it now. So you'd have those huge disruptions. And that, I'm not saying that's bad, but there would be a huge clamoring on the part of the states. Presumably, if you ended Medicare and Medicaid, that would be a huge reduction in the federal budget. In theory, it could mean, maybe ending the federal income tax, which only a libertarian would actually do that. But let's say it came with ending the federal income tax, so you could say to the citizens of your state, no one has to pay an income tax anymore. No, you don't get these health care handouts anymore from the federal government, but you don't pay income tax anymore. That might be something that people could buy into and say, okay, so now we have to pay for it on our own, or our state's going to take it up. But at least we've made a lot of progress because we've gotten the federal government. Now, if the federal government got out of health care and took I don't know the exact number, but it's probably in the ballpark of over $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion that they spend between Medicare, Medicaid, plus a whole bunch of other programs.
Right.
Then the big question of the day is, what happens to that money? Are they going to bring the federal budget down and cut spending? Or are they going to put that money into something else? That's what Trump just did with his spending cuts. He put it right into the military.
Right.
That is no gain for freedom. That is no gain for the taxpayer. And so it would make your proposal would be dramatically affected by whether or not that decrease in spending went completely back to the taxpayer and or to ending the deficit, or if it was just used for something else. If it was used for something else, I'd say bad idea, no gain.
Oh, no,
not
I totally agree. But at least each state now has to make a decision. And each state is sovereign. They can have a totally different health care or no health care or even a free market system. Because right now, if I want a free market system health care, I have to move out of the United States altogether. I have to go to some...
finding any place where...
it's very difficult, but there are places that medical care is more efficient and much better here. Yes. So if I wanted it, I have to move out of the United States. I don't want to move out of the United States, but if I had to move from, let's say, from Oklahoma to Texas, I would move in a New York minute if I knew that was the case.
Right, but keep in mind that not everybody has your mobility. A lot of people, they have family, they have kids, they have jobs, they can't necessarily pick up and move. So don't forget those people.
And I hope they're angry enough that they go 3 blocks away to their state senator and with a torch in their hand, and maybe they'll get the picture. I'm just saying that you have to bring it home. And listen, I'm not an advocate of state-run health care. Don't get me wrong. I'm anti all of that. I'm just saying from Trump's point of view, he could have pushed it down to the state. The state would have said, not us. Then get rid of it, go to free market. You would have forced a free market system on them.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily, because they may well tax and spend and just create another state-by-state version of Obamacare. I mean, they already have a Romney Care in Massachusetts, and a lot of states have something in that general ballpark, and many others are pushing for it. They're all pushing for it in all the states. All these socialized medicine advocates are pushing for it continually. And of course, the Democrats now, after the GOP bill failed last week, they're all pushing, now it's time for single payer, yeah.
Oh, of course, we knew this was coming, right. We knew this was coming.
So you need to be very strong. You need to put a focus on, we don't want a replacement at the state level. We want free market. And if you get rid of anything in the federal government, no matter what it is, those savings go back to the taxpayer. They never, ever, ever go to other government spending.
I agree.
That has to be a key part of your talking points.
Yeah, no, I agree. I am just so fed up with the federal government taking on more and more responsibility for things that are my personal responsibility and then telling me how much it's going to cost me and how I'm going to do it. I have had it with him.
I don't blame you. It's terrible. It's good to get mad, but don't let him get your goat.
I know. I'm well past that. Carla, I'm so well past that. I mean, it's gone.
Okay.
And anyway, I never watch the news or anything like that. They talk about healthcare, what they're doing, and these clowns on television, they drive me nuts. They make it sound as if the proposals that they have are going to really materially affect the positively our healthcare system. None of them will say, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to change it, and it's going to be just as bad, if not worse. They won't even tell the truth. Now, these guys, the Lou Dobbs, the Varneys, all these guys on television, especially on Fox News, they keep it be that stupid.
Well, one of the things that frustrates me is just laying out what was the proposal.
Yeah.
Now, I heard Chris Plant on the radio the other day saying he doesn't know. It hasn't been published. I don't know exactly. I don't know if that's true, but I know he said he doesn't know what's in it. And there was no doubt deals going on at the last minute. But just the fact, but there's no desire in the media to really make the facts clear. What is it? And what are all the regulations that we already have in place? And above all, they don't really want to have the conversation about how much better this can be for people. Getting rid of big government creates tremendous prosperity, opportunity, better health care, better education. All these things happen with a free market, and that is not being discussed. It's you get glimpses of it here and there, but it's not being discussed.
But no one asked the question, who wrote the bill? And don't tell me Congressman so-and-so, because the guy doesn't know how to write. It's 1,700 pages long or whatever. Someone wrote 1,700 pages. Who were those? Who were the authors? And you'll find that the authors are the medical community, are the drug companies and et al. And
right, the insurance companies.
Once you ask the right questions, the answers you get you're not going to like, and then there would be resistance for government-run health care, because they'll realize it's not government-run health care. It's the 1/10 of 1% billionaires that are writing it, who own the drug companies and paying off they never want to connect the politician with the ultra rich who are rich, not because they're entrepreneurs, but because they're living off the government the trough.
Yeah, well, it's not just corporations. Keep in mind, unions. I mean, Absolutely. These healthcare unions now are very powerful, nurse associations, of course, the American Medical Association. These people play a role, too. In other areas, teachers' union, enormously powerful and well-funded. So it's not just corporations by any means. It's corporations, cartels, and unions, government-funded unions, either direct government employee unions or industries that are funded by government that form unions, like in a lot of the healthcare industry, and it can also be foreign governments. These are the entities that drive a lot of government policy.
Yeah. All right, we have another caller. What area code is that?
818.
Area code 818, you're on the air. Your question or comment, please.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to help your program out here. I don't know if you're playing it. When your program is being played on Blog Talk Radio, and even now when I'm waiting on hold, it's hard to understand what anyone's saying because it keeps cutting out.
You know, you're absolutely correct. We've been trying to correct that, caller. What is your first name, by the way? Hello?
Even right now, I'm not even sure what you just said. It's,
oh, you don't? Okay, I was just asking your first name. Yeah, we've been having that problem, and we've been trying to solve it with them now for about 4 weeks, and we can't seem to find out where the problem is. We actually rewired part of the studio because we thought it was on our end. And we're at wit's end with that. We may have to find a alternate incoming phone line. But I want to thank you so much for calling Liberty Talk Radio. I can hear you pretty well now. Would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah, I just, you're asking me or someone else?
Yes, I'm asking you, sir.
Oh yeah, no, but I'm saying if you continue your program, you might actually be wasting your time because it's not understandable. Like on Blog Talk Radio and on Hold, it's not understandable then.
Right. Well, we're on about 4 different platforms, so Blog Talk Radio is only one. It's a major one, but it is only one of few. So that's why we continue doing so. If Blog Talk Radio was the only one, then we probably would have done exactly that. Do you have a question or a comment for our guest, by the way, while we have you on the phone?
Yeah, I got that part. I apologize, I'm not getting the rest of it. I don't even know what the topic is. I got the part where you're saying something about Blog Talk Radio, and if I have a question for the lady on the phone, right. But everything else is just like, can I give you an idea of what it sounds like, actually?
Yes, please.
Like, it sounds like this is not exactly how it is, but I'm just trying to give you an idea. Imagine I were to say to you a sentence of, I'm going to the store to get some donuts. Here's what it sounds like.
Okay, I got it. All right. All right.
That's kind of how it sounds like.
Yeah.
There's no way to make out what anyone's saying. It's not just my computer. I've tried other computers.
No, it's not yours. It's not on your end. It's on our end. We've had that problem. We've tried.
On the phone then.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. We need to get back to our guest. Thank you very much for listening to Liberty Talk Radio, and we will have that fixed within the next week, we hope. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Carla. Well, we've been having this phone line now problems for weeks, and we've tried everything, different phone lines, everything, and it just seems to be getting worse. So something's wrong somewhere. We haven't been able to find it. Anyway, but I tell you a big problem that I'm having with the Trump presidency. I don't hear words from him that are similar to the Constitution. Never hear him mention the Constitution. Free markets, never hear that. All I hear from this guy is that he thinks that the United States is his country, his company, and he's going to make the rules and he's going to fix it somehow. Now, I have a problem with everyone saying how successful he is, and we should give him free rein because he's a successful businessman. Well, any man who's filed bankruptcy 6 times and gone through 3 marriages, I would say probably has not been the ultimate of success. So I don't trust what he does. I don't trust the way he thinks, and I don't think what he's doing is in the right direction whatsoever.
Yeah, what disappoints me most, the Constitution, I actually recommend that candidates not bring that up to most audiences because most people don't really understand or know what the Constitution is and what it does. It's fine if you're talking to liberty advocates, libertarians, small government, certain Republicans, certain Democrats, but the free market, certain people understand that. A lot of people have been very badly misled to believe that it's something evil, that it's unregulated and unsafe in some way, and that is so completely backwards, and we need to correct that at every opportunity. The free market is far safer, far higher quality than any government regulator can ever produce. The thing I think we need to focus on more, and what Trump is not talking about, and none of them talk about, is shrinking the totality of government. Cutting the overall size, scope, authority, spending, taxation, liabilities, assets, and debt of government. Shrinking it, making it small, draining. That's how you really drain a swamp. You don't keep the water at the same level. You make the water level go down. And if you want it to go down enough that people actually can see the benefits of freedom, you have to make it go down a lot. You need bold reductions in government. Never did Trump talk about boldly reducing the overall size, scope, authority of government. And now he's proven this out when he goes and makes spending cuts. And what does he do? He goes and pours all that money into the military, of all things, that is already vastly overfunded. Here's an organization that cannot be audited. It is unauditable, according to the CBO or Comptroller's Office, whoever keeps the tabs of and actually audits the federal government. It is incapable of being audited. Now, what if you're a Fortune 500 company and you tell the IRS, and the IRS says, I can't audit you? What do you tell them? Too bad, Charlie? No. Someone's going to get in a lot of trouble if you can't be audited. They want to be able to audit you and see your financials and decide how much taxes to gouge from your revenue. But here's the Pentagon that, is $600-700 billion, plus there's several other budgets that account for total military spending, accounting to, by some estimates, well over $1 trillion. And most of that goes to the Pentagon, which cannot be audited. Hello? How is it that you don't just cut someone off completely who can't be audited? If you can't be audited and show the taxpayer where their money's going, you don't get any more money. How about that? And yet, what Trump did with this organization is throw more money at it. What? Now, in 2016, we have a pledge. If you go to the Libertarian Party website, lp.org, there's a bunch of pledges. Just search on candidate pledges or click on it. It's in the footer of the homepage. And you can click on a page for federal or state or local candidate pledges. And under the federal page, there was 15 different pledges. Dozens of our candidates took each of these pledges. One of them was to cut the military by 60%. If we had cut it by 60%, it would still be larger than China's and Russia's military combined.
Correct.
Okay? I mean, it's huge. We have thousands of foreign bases all over the world. I'm sorry, we have thousands of bases within the United States. Do we need 3,000 bases in the United States? We have something like 800 bases around the world.
Right.
Why? Why are we in 100-some different countries with troops and outposts? And some countries, Germany, Italy, Japan, we have tens of thousands of American troops stationed in these countries. This is crazy. We need to dramatically downsize the military, and Trump has thrown more money at it, which is why when anyone says they're going after waste or they're going to drain the swamp or they're going to go after big government, unless they talk about the total size of government, which right now at the federal level is about $4 trillion, and bringing it down substantially. Gary Johnson said balance a budget, which would have been several $100 billion. Some libertarians would say bring it down to 3, 2, $1 trillion or less, because that's getting much closer to what the federal government actually needs for the very few legal constitutional functions that it's supposed to administer, and the rest should go. So that's the conversation we need to have. Not just, we need to talk about the numbers in the very, very basic. The number's at 4, let's bring it to 3, to 2, to 1, or something. Harry Brown was our presidential candidate in 1996 and 2000.
Right.
Back then, the budget, it moves every year, so it depends on which year you're talking about. But when Clinton left office, it was $1.9 trillion. And in 98, it was about $1.65 trillion. It's more than doubled since then. Harry Brown proposed over 8 years getting it down from, let's call it $1.7 trillion to $100 billion total for the federal government. And he wrote 2 books, 2 campaign books, Why Government Doesn't Work and The Great Libertarian Offer, explaining what he'd get rid of. He would have privatized Social Security, sold off federal assets to pay off those who contributed to Social Security, were older and dependent on it, so they would have their own private account that they could invest any way they want, get the federal government completely out of the business of Social Security, no more Social Security tax, no more income tax, end the war on drugs, cut the military. He put out a bunch of specific proposals, and he explained how it would work and why our lives would be a lot better. And the federal income tax back then, I think he said that each family would get something like $6,000 back every year in their family budget. Today it's over $11,000 on average that the average American family would have in their budget if they weren't paying just the federal income tax. That doesn't even include Social Security, corporate taxes, debt taxes, or anything else, all of which can go and be replaced by small government solutions. So this is the kind of talk we need to have. We need to be talking about this over and over and over again so that people start to get used to the idea. You know, we did this in Massachusetts with our End the Income Tax Ballot initiatives that I've talked about before on your show. And what was interesting about that was we did 3 of them in the state. We did one in 2002, 2008, and 2010. First time we proposed ending the income tax, people were sort of like, huh? Can you do that? But they voted for it anyway. In the privacy of the voting booth, 45% said yes. It almost passed.
Wow.
We never passed any of our initiatives, but they got more votes each time, just short of 1 million votes of the last time. But what was interesting was by the third initiative, people were getting more and more used to the idea of, the third one was actually to cut the sales tax. The first 2 were to cut the income tax. No one's talking about this anywhere. We need a lot of talk about this because the more you talk about it, the more normal it becomes. What's normal to us is more big government because that's all that anyone ever hears. Let's build a wall. Let's jack up the military. More this, more that, more that, more that. And so we're just not having the conversation about actually shrinking government. And we need to be having this conversation over and over and over. And I hope you have a lot of guests who keep talking about dramatic reductions in government, coupled with explaining why the average voter is so much better off with small government, personal responsibility, low taxes, and a vibrant free market that is monitored and regulated every second of every day by consumers, by media, by watchdog groups, by professional societies. That's what actually regulates products and services and keeps them safe, efficient, convenient, low cost.
Now, the free market is self-regulating. The free market is like Mother Nature. Mother Nature always gets her way eventually. The free market always gets its way eventually. The one item that no one ever talks about are the unreconciled items on our balance sheet, which, and depending on who you ask, the number is different. I don't have a specific number, but I understand it's over $6 trillion that do not appear on the on the 20 trillion national debt. So it would be over 26 trillion if they reconciled it. Because they didn't reconcile them, they don't go on the balance sheet, which to me is insanity. If I did that to can you imagine me telling the IRS, "Oh, I didn't reconcile that item yet, so I'm not going to count it on my tax."
So you're talking; these are existing current debts.
Yeah,
you're talking about
absolutely, and it's estimated to be well over $6 trillion. In fact, Professor Kutlakoff, University of Boston, has been on the show several times. He estimates that we are now approaching funded and unfunded debt, long-term debt, if you will. We're approaching $250 quadrillion. Here's my point. We've reached the point of no return. We cannot continue. Eventually, and it's probably be within the next few years, someone's going to say, we don't want U.S. dollars anymore because it's debt. You can't pay this back in anything other than printing more dollars, and we don't want your more worthless dollars to us. We want something else back. And people will stop funding it. Once they do that, the whole ball game is over. The entire ball game is over. Maybe at that time we'll be looking at defunding all these items, taking the military, just like the Russians did back in 1989, when all of a sudden the Russian soldiers were selling their uniforms to buy food, in Eastern Europe. I mean, I can see this coming to us because we are as much in debt as the Soviet Union was back in the late 1980s. And we are approaching numbers that heretofore were unimaginable, but yet we keep on holding on. And I think it's going to come down to the free market or Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it, to say, sorry, ball game's over because no one else is going to buy your debt, and it's over, and we're going to have hyperinflation to beat the band, and everyone's going to be broke who's holding on to U.S. dollars. That's my take on it. What say you?
Yeah. Well, it's possible. And, of course, the other countries of the world are doing the same thing. They're playing the same game. They've got huge debt. And like us, they have a fiat currency where they outlaw alternative currencies. So how that's actually going to play out, I don't know. But it's certainly a real possibility, and it's happened in Zimbabwe and Venezuela and many countries throughout history where, at some point the buck stops here, pardon the pun, but it's a risk. It's a risk. And now, when you say point of no return, I'm not willing to buy that, because I believe if people wake up, if we get some libertarian candidates in office in key positions, and it's not impossible to think about 2020, given that we've made some serious inroads with the FEC and the Commission on Presidential Debates. Had they let Gary Johnson into the debates last fall, we would have had a different presidential election. If libertarians get into the debates in 2020, it's going to be a different ballgame. And if that's the case, then we can start having a serious talk about cutting the size of government, along with the liabilities, along with selling off a lot of assets to pay off those liabilities. Now, one thing that I want to throw out when it comes to liabilities, it's kind of a flaky business to say what our liabilities are when you consider that it's all a function of the laws that are in place, right? And if you change the laws, that changes the liabilities, and it also depends on, well, how much time are you talking about? Are you talking about our liability to pay off Social Security for everybody who's alive today? What about the people who are born tomorrow? It gets kind of fuzzy. But suffice it to say, we have many tens of trillions of dollars, and some would say hundreds of trillions of dollars in liabilities that are unfunded, and on top of the debt, whatever that number is, that are just really staggering figures. But a lot of that can be fixed by cutting government, by balancing the budget immediately, by selling off a lot of federal assets. The first thing I would do if I was selling federal assets is use it to liquidize Social Security, because that was paid into by people who were forced to pay into it, and many of whom are now dependent on it. And it's just not fair to someone who had 15% of their income taken from them their whole working lives, and now they're 80 and they can't work, and telling them, screw you, you have nothing. They're the first people that I would look out for. You get the government out of health care, this enormous bill that we pay both through our mandated premiums, out of pocket, and through government. Government pays for more than 50% of health care directly. It's now at, I forget how many trillion, is it 3 or 4 trillion? It's just an ungodly number. Maybe that number would be $500 billion or a few hundred billion for better quality care.
Right.
Much better quality care. Now you've gotten rid of a whole lot of liability, because a lot of our liability is Medicaid and Medicare. Okay, you replace those two programs with a private healthcare industry that's completely private, that's completely cheap. You've dissolved a lot of those liabilities. You get the government out of Social Security, you've gotten rid of a huge liability. So there's things we can do that could change things very quickly. And it means waking up to the problems and getting the people in office who are going to do something about it.
Right. Well, the unfortunate part is that when you reduce these government programs, the unemployment rate will go up dramatically, because there are so many thousands and thousands of people getting paid big money with great pensions and benefits and whatever, and now they're out of a job, and they don't have skills because they've been working for the government, pushing paper, making great money, and now they'll be lucky to get a job as a checkout counter of the discount store. It's going to be very difficult, but I mean, that's maybe.
But there's certainly truth to what you're saying. But I think at the same time, I mean, I live right outside of D.C. here, and it's a crazy place. But the people here are generally, a lot of them are sharp, skilled, And yeah, they'd have to relearn skills and do so quickly, but I think the vast majority of them certainly could do that. And there's no reason, reality has a way of kicking people in the butt. When you think of people who left their homes and immigrated to the United States, what a dramatic change that was. And they had to learn this whole new culture, a new language, and figure out a way to make money, start a business. They were faced with enormous challenges, and they found a way to do it. They found a way to do it because they had to. And when you make a change like this, where people who are now pushing paper and in useless government jobs, they'll find a way. And the beauty of it is that when you reduce government, you create jobs. And the lie that politicians say is, we need to this program, that program, TARP this, TARP that, bail out that, because no one will have jobs unless we create them. No, the private sector, every time they create a government sector job, they kill 2 private sector jobs. And we have some really solid backing for this assertion, because in Massachusetts in 2010, our proposal to cut the sales tax, a think tank in Boston, the Beacon Hill Institute, did a study that showed it would have been around 2 or 2.5 to 1 new private sector job creation versus lost government jobs. Jobs everywhere. The problem would probably be finding people to fill the jobs.
And they would be productive jobs also. They would be productive jobs, not push paper. Well, we have, hold on one second, please, Carla. Is that 973 still? He's gone from there. Okay. We had a note put in front of me that says, does the government ever talk about government control of the American people? That's a good question, because many of these programs, I think there's got to be an element of, we can control the population better, if we control the purse strings. But if we give people more freedom, we lose control. You ever hear talk about that?
It's kind of implicit in everything they say, but usually the politicians don't talk about controlling the people because that doesn't sound good. They put it in terms of giving you health care and giving you education and protecting you from the evils of the world. They learn ways of making it sound really good and nice and reasonable. They don't like to talk about controlling you. So I don't hear it worded that way.
Okay. Well, Carla, we're about at the witching hour. I'd like to give the last minute to you to wrap things up for us. And I want to, in advance, thank you so much for returning to Liberty Talk Radio. Love having you on the program. We always have a great banter, and we just learn a heck of a lot and give us an update of what's going on in the Libertarian Party. I just wish there were more of us, that's all.
Yeah. Well, the way there is for you, listener, to join the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party is a remarkable place because the people here really are passionate about liberty, and they realize there's nothing in it for them. This is not the Democrat and Republican Party, which are money machines and privilege machines. And no, all you get from being a libertarian or joining the party or donating to the party or supporting a libertarian candidate is the chance for more freedom in this country. And that is the greatest blessing in the world for us and for our world neighbors as well. So please consider joining the Libertarian Party. You can do it for 7 cents a day, $25 a year. Become a member at lp.org. Get involved with your state party. Go to some meetups or some state party events. And above all, support your Libertarian Party campaigns. They're often Lone Rangers working by themselves with a very slim team of volunteers. They always need help. They always need more donations. And they're great and good people who really just want the best for this country. So please consider supporting them and joining the party.
And people should stop voting for the lesser of two evils.
Absolutely. Vote Libertarian.
Carla, thank you so much for being on our program. I do hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date to give us an update.
Would love to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, folks. This is the end of today's program. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away, or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.